Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the ability to get in front of this group and talk about voter registration. Certainly, the League of Women Voters isn't the only organization that can do voter registration. We're just super, super active in it. And when we train people, that means that you can all go forth and do the same thing too. You don't have to ask our permission. You just, now that you will be educated on how to do it and the proper ways to do it, you can just go ahead and do it yourselves. I will share the screen for the PowerPoint. And we will go through this. Let me make this big. And then we want to do from the beginning. There we go. So can everybody see that okay?
We can see the, yes, yeah, there we, yep, informing voters, empowering people, yeah.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
So today you will get a PDF of this presentation, the federal voter registration form, and we'll talk in a little bit about why we use the federal form if you're doing it on paper. An election essentials checklist for the November general election, some dates on it and just ID requirements and things like that. And then the 2024 Indiana election calendar. We're going to cover how to engage voters and what their eligibility is, both the paper and the online process for voter registration. There's some details that you need to know about that. It's nothing very complicated, but it's important to understand that. Again, the essential deadlines. We'll talk a bit about Vote 411, which is the League's one-stop shop for all voting information. And then the indianavoters.com or .in.gov, same website basically, which is the Secretary of State's website, which is actually really neat. The voter ID requirements, and then making an election day plan. When we talk about voter engagement, we want to make sure that we are not challenging people, that we're being friendly and, hey, do you want to vote? We shouldn't be getting into argumentative discussions with people about why they should vote. It should be a friendly conversation, and talk to people in a way that you think is going to reach them. And don't be saviors. We say that in the league a lot because we're many times a bunch of older white women, and we don't want to parachute into communities that look different than us and say, hey, you should vote. So we try to be sensitive around that one in particular. Know the audience that you're talking to. So if you're going into a community or at an event or whatever, ask the kinds of questions that would engage the people that you're talking to. Not simply, are you registered to vote, but can I help you check your voter registration? Is it current for where you currently live? Because a lot of people don't realize they have to change their registration when they move. And are you ready, or do you have a plan for election day? Let's talk about what your plan looks like. So that's the kind of voter engagement that you should be conducting. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? It seems pretty obvious. Okay. So voter eligibility, the requirements are the same across the country. You have to be a citizen of the United States. You can't be here on a green card. You can't be going through the naturalization process, but not gone through the actual ceremony yet to become a citizen. You have to be a citizen. You have to be at least 18 years of age by the date of the next general election. So this year that would be November the 5th. So they could be 17 now, register to vote, and vote in the November general election. Of course, if they're over 18 or over already, then yes, that they qualify. And then of course you have to be registered to vote. And we're going to go through what those registration requirements are. The Indiana requirements are that you have to have resided in your voting precinct for at least 30 days before the next election. So in Marion County, and we'll go through this a little bit later too, but in Marion County, we don't do we live in precincts. We live where we live, and those are divided by precincts. But we're in a vote center county, and we can vote anywhere in Marion County. So if you moved less than 30 days before the election, you're going to get the ballot for your old address. Does that make sense to everybody? And then, of course, you can't be imprisoned after being convicted of a crime, because obviously you can't get to a polling site. If folks are arrested and in pretrial detention, they can vote. They would have to vote by absentee ballot, and we'll go over that in a bit too. But you know, I was working at a second chances workshop that the Marion County Prosecutor's Office puts on to help people expunge records and get IDs back and things like that. And I'll get to your question in just a second. And this one young woman said to me, I can't register to vote. I'm a felon. And I said, yeah, but you're not locked up right now. Yes, you can vote. We just need to get you registered again. And what was the question, Sarah?
Oh, you basically just answered it. So if a person has already been convicted of a felony, they are still allowed to vote. They just have to re-register.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yep. And we'll talk about how to check registrations for folks that may have been locked up or whatever. We're going to go over the paper application or paper registration process and the online process. For the paper process, we use the federal form, and the federal form is what I sent Sarah just before this thing started today. And it has the highlights on it, and we're going to go over that in detail. It's just that it's all the states and territories in the US that can vote have to accept the federal form. If you use the Indiana form, so you can go to Google and use the Indiana form, but because you're the one that's going to turn it in, you have to give the voter a receipt that shows your home address. That's why we don't use the Indiana form. There is nothing like that on the federal form. And then online, we recommend going to vote411.org. That is the league's one-stop shop for all things election related. And at Vote 411, you will further be directed to the Indiana site, indianavoters.com, which is where the registration happens. So why go to Vote 411 first? Well, it captures the email and then sends out reminders about election day. So that's why we suggest going to Vote 411. But if you're registering people, you could go straight to indianavoters.com just to do your registrations. But we're going to delve into the paper form a little bit first. So this is what it looks like. Like I said, it's valid in all states and territories, and it's good for all elections. Those links are, if you want to read some more about it, the National Voter Registration Application Form. So it's a booklet with all kinds of instructions in it, but we're pretty much going to cover all of it now. And the second link there is it's available in 21 languages. So if you need to go into a community whose native language is not English, go to that link and see if you can find the correct form for in the language that you're looking for. So this is what the application looks like. And this is the top half of the application. The two questions at the top have to be answered yes. Truthfully, yes. And if anybody checks no, stop. Don't continue with the form, because if they're not a citizen or they're not 18 on or before election day, or already 18, then they'd have to check no, and then you shouldn't continue with the form. We do at the league a ton of voter registrations after naturalization events, and there's 3 or 4 naturalization events of about 100 people each at the different sites in Marion County. And we'll walk around, it's like 100 people come out, brand new citizens, and we're running around with clipboards with this form on it. And we're like, fill this out, would you like to register to vote? And a lot of people forget to check those 2 boxes. So we're always reminding them, check those 2 boxes. You're a citizen, yes. You're 18 or over, yes. And then we continue, we have to continue on with the rest of the form. The honorific you don't necessarily need to use. We don't get pushed about that. Last name, first name, middle name, it should match what's on the driver's license. If it's a guy that you're registering and they're a junior or a senior or a second, third, fourth, whatever, that's where it can get a little dicey. So if they are one of those things at the end of the name line, just make sure they check the correct box there. Home address. If they get, I never seen anybody fill out line 3. That's why it's not highlighted. So if you get your mail at a different place, the home address needs to be a physical address, of course. Date of birth is a must. Telephone number is optional, but the only people that are going to have this form are the voter registration people. And I encourage people to put the number down, just because if voter registration had a question, they could call the voter and maybe clear it up quickly instead of sending them something in the mail. The ID number can be one of two things: their Indiana driver's license number, or the last 4 of their social security number. Not the full social security number, the last 4. So the state ID number, as you all know, you get a driver's license number and it lives with you forever and ever and ever. That's your number. If you have a permit, you're a new driver and you have a permit, that number is going to stay with you forever and ever. Even when you get a license, it's going to be the same number. And if you have a card for ID purposes that is not a driving card, that number will live with you too. So whatever kind of state ID you've been issued, a driver's license, a permit, an ID card, that's the number you would put in here. We have been told by the people at Marion County Voter Registration that they prefer the driver's license number or state ID number over a social security number, because they will ping the BMV to see if they can find the person, say the handwriting's not great or whatever, and it just gives them a better point of contact to actually find who the person is. So when I do voter registrations after naturalization ceremonies, I go through the form and say, answer the 2 questions at top, fill in all the highlighted areas. The ID number would be your Indiana driver's license number, sign in the box below that, and then put today's date. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The bottom half of the form, oh, let me go back to this for a second. Don't alter the form. So anywhere that there's highlights, that's acceptable. Don't do any, you should not be writing on the form in any other way other than where this is highlighted. And the version that I sent Sarah is highlighted in these exact spots. The bottom sections of the form. So if you're dealing with, on the paper form, if you're dealing with voters who are already registered, said, oh, I moved. Oh, I changed my name. They would still need to fill out the top half of the form. The bottom half of the form, if they changed their name, would be their old name in A, or if they moved, would be their old address in B. So they would fill out the new information in the top half of the form, and it's like, oh, I moved. Okay, this is where I was registered. B is where they was registered. And then I've never seen anybody fill out C, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And if you assisted them in any way, then you would have to put your name, address, and phone number in the bottom of the form, like you filled it out for them, for instance.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For B, what if the person doesn't remember?
Doesn't remember their old address?
Yes, so I'll be working with foster youth who could have up to 5 different addresses in 1 year per year. So it might be hard to track down where you previously registered.
In that case, I would look up their voter registration online and see what the address is in the statewide voter registration system. And we'll talk about how to do that. So if they're already registered, and they've moved and they don't know what the old address is, then you could look them up at indianavoters.com and see what the old address is. And then they would say, oh yeah, there's my old address. Well, I'm not there anymore. So here's my new one.
I have a question too. For C, I assume that would also be used in an instance if you're registering somebody who might be experiencing homelessness.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. Yep. And a lot of times, from what I understand, some of the shelters and I don't know about soup kitchens and things, you guys might be better versed in this, will allow their address to be used as the person's address. Okay. The forms, if you're going to do the paper forms, The law says that they have to be turned in within 10 days. What I generally do after the naturalization ceremonies is take them immediately to the city county building. Like within an hour of them being filled out, I'm handing them over because you need to keep this people's personal information. So you have to have a chain of custody there. You don't want them just sitting around in your car and then getting messed up or whatever. And we will talk about where they can be turned in. And then you do need to be aware of the voter registration deadline. Do not mail these forms into voter registration because it trips another requirement if it's mailed in, that the person who shows up to vote the first time then also has to bring extra information with them, like a utility bill or something like that that shows their address. And we don't want to do that. So the completed forms, again, don't mail them in. You can take them to the county election board or the Indiana election division. So we hand deliver them. City county building, it's on the main floor. You have to go through security to get into the city county building. And it's on the west side of the building, southwest side of the building, in this little office back kind of in the corner. It looks like you're leaving the building on the west side if you're familiar with the city county building. And you just hand them in there. I did check yesterday, and it is also possible to turn the forms into the receptionist at the Election Services Center, which is at 3737 East Washington Street. It's an old, I think it's probably an old grocery store, but the Marion County Election Board has had that as the Election Services Center for years. There's free parking. That's the point there. So you can get to 3737 East Washington. I think it's Washington and Sherman, is that it maybe? And just hand them into the receptionist there. I have the hours highlighted 8 to 4:30 I have to verify that to make sure, but kind of general business hours, you can just drop them off with a receptionist in that building. And then the third option is to the Secretary of State's office, which, okay, now you got to park, find a place to park downtown on, 200 West Washington Street where the state capitol is, and go to the building behind and the South Tower, and then up to the third floor and turn them in there, which seems like a bit of a faff, frankly, and I wouldn't do it. So if you have the paper forms, I would say just go to the Election Services Center and take advantage of the free parking and hand them in there. Any questions about that? Okay. So this is the way you would do it if you were doing it online. And I'm amazed because I work at a polling site on election day, and I'm amazed the number of people that don't know about this site, indianavoters.com, which takes them to indianavoters.in.gov. It's the same, the state owns both of them. This is the voter portal. So you can register to vote, you can check your voter registration, you can request an absentee ballot, you can find your voting location. You can read about election security, super, super easy to use. So if you're out in the community, and every person, I think nearly, not always, I shouldn't say that, it's not fair, but nearly everybody has a phone these days. And if you're comfortable using your phone, use your phone. If you're comfortable having them do it and you can look over their shoulder, oh, go to indianavoters.com. Let's check your status. Oh, it didn't find you. Did you have a name change? Did you, whatever. You can walk them through. It's really the first two buttons there, register to vote and check your status. And you can help anybody in the world do that. You're not registering them, you're helping them register themselves. Any questions about this website? Okay. The only caveat to the online voter registration is that you have to put down your Indiana driver's license number or the ID number. You can't use the last four of the social. So just keep that in mind too if you're going to do it online. Register them for the first time online. The essential deadlines for voter registration. October 7th at midnight is when voter registration closes. So if you're helping people register right up until the last second, you can do it online up until 11:59 p.m. If you're gonna do it on paper, you've got to get them handed into the voter registration office by the time the office closes at 4:30 on October, 4:30 or 5 o'clock, 4:30, I think, on October the 7th. And don't mail them because A, it trips another requirement and postmarks don't count. The very next day, early voting begins on October the 8th. And that would be in the city county building. The election board, well, we're talking about Marion County, so it will be the next day. Some election boards will do different things. I can't imagine that any of the election boards will not have voting in the main office or whatever the day after voter registration closes. The absentee by mail application deadline. So, and we'll talk more about absentee voting a little bit later. But the latest you could do that application is October 24th. Well, if you mail in the application by October 24th, it may not get to them and you get a ballot back in time to vote and have it turned in by November the 5th. So the suggestion is if you do if you request an absentee ballot, that you do that online as well. Early voting ends at noon on November the 4th. And then election day is November 5th, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Voter registration closes. So it closes on after October the 7th. So from October 8th until December 1st, voter registration technically is closed. People can still register to vote. It's just that they don't end up in the statewide voter registration system until those start to be processed in starting December 2nd. Any questions about those dates? Okay. Vote 411 is the one-stop shop for all election related information. So the League of Women Voters, as a not-for-profit, this is a national website, and the local leagues, so the Marion County League, the Indianapolis League, would send out questionnaires to the local candidates, and the state league would send them out to the state candidates, like Congress and stuff like that. And say, here's the list of the questions we'd like you to answer. And they should be answering them. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But if they don't answer them, that's an indication of maybe the politician or the candidate. But we recommend the use of Vote 411. It'll list polling locations. It's going to ask for your address. So it says, oh, you're in Indiana. You're in this place. This is where you would go vote. These are the places you would go vote. This is what it looks like when you get in there. So register to vote, verify, and find out who's on your ballot. So register to vote and verify voter registration will then further take you to indianavoters.com website. This is a pretty easy website to use. Indiana's voting ID laws. It has to display your photo. It has to display a name that conforms to the voter registration record, and it has to have an expiration date that is either current or expired after the last general election. So if it's expired after November 8th, 2022, they can still vote. But if it expired November 1st, 2022, they can't use that as ID to vote. But you can also, so this is voting in person, right? For voting in person, you can also use a passport. You can't use a passport to register to vote, but you can use a passport to as ID to identify who you are when you go to vote in person. This does not apply to military IDs, by the way.
Can you talk really quick? I remember the first time I voted, I was a freshman in college. It was very exciting. And I was able to use my college ID because I went to Indiana University. So it was technically considered a state issued ID. Is that still accurate?
Yes. Yes.
So for
yes.
any
So,
school?
Right. So it has to have the same information. It has to have an expiration date. It has to have your photo. The name has to conform, et cetera, et cetera. And it has to be from a university that is a public university. So Purdue, IU, Indiana State, Ball State. Notre Dame, no. Rose-Hulman, no. Butler, no. So it has to be a state university.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. But it has to have the same requirements as, the Indiana driver's license. There's a first time voter checklist that you could go to at Vote 411. And we would recommend that you encourage people to go there. So you could look at that yourself and then talk to people about what's on that checklist. And then we have the election essentials as well, which is this. So it has the dates down the left-hand side for making a voting plan. Am I going to vote early? Am I going to vote on election day? Where am I going to vote? Et cetera, et cetera. So Marion County will have approximately 186 polling sites on election day. So on November the 5th. Early voting should begin probably, let me look at my calendar, but I'm thinking early voting, and the election board hasn't certified this yet, so that's why I'm qualifying it. So November the 5th is a Tuesday. I'm thinking that early voting in the satellite locations around the county is probably going to start on or around October the 26th. So the city county building will have early voting as of October the 8th. Downtown city county building, people that live and work downtown can use that. Anybody can use it. But you have to find a place to park if you don't live down there or work down there. So October the 8th, early voting at the city county building, but then on or about October 26th, the satellite voting locations in the county in each of the townships will open, like, I don't know, 11 to 7 maybe every day. I'm not sure what the hours are either. You might want to jot this down. The place to go for this information, super useful website, is vote.indy.gov. And it's not going to have all that information. It'll have it right now for the primary. The Marion County Election Board will need to certify this again for the November election. So this information will change. So I would encourage people in September, October to use the vote.indy.gov website. But it has an interactive map where you can see all of the election day vote centers and then all of the satellite sites and the hours and locations. So for instance, in Wayne Township, it was the Global Village Welcome Center. In Washington Township, it was St. Luke's up on West 86th Street. In Wayne Township, or not Wayne, Warren Township, I forget where it was. So I forget some of the townships about where they were, but it's listed on that vote.indy.gov website. So really useful website to use. And then just again, the dates, October 7th, October 8th, early voting, the 24th deadline for absentee voting, and then November 5th for election day, and then the voter ID requirements. Just so you know, when people vote in person, the address on their ID does not need to match the address that's in the voter registration system. So you can't be turned away from voting if the address and the voter registration system does not match what's on your ID, your Indiana license. The purpose of showing the ID is to verify you are who you say you are. Your picture's on the license, you're standing right in front of the election worker. Yes, you are who you say you are. If your address is not correct, then they will have you fill out, at the time you vote, have you fill out a form to update to your new address, which can't be turned away. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So how do you know you're registered? You get a card in the mail about 30 days after the application is received. It just verifies your registration. You do not need to bring that card with you when you vote, because it's just a postcard and it doesn't have your picture on it. It doesn't have an expiration date, but that is to verify that you are registered to vote. Of course, the other one is to go to indianavoters.com and look yourself up and see if you're registered to vote. You could do that anytime in the weeks after you know the form has been turned in. Oh, they haven't processed it yet. Oh, there it is. Now I'm in the system. And then you'll get the card sometime after that. College students, if you're dealing with anybody who is a student, or going to be a student in the fall, and you're registering them, students get very confused about this. And this is, I think, sometimes why we see such low rates of voter turnout among the younger crowd. They can register in one of two places. They can register at the Indiana address where they live while they're at school, or they can register at the Indiana address where they live while they're not at school, their home address, in other words, where maybe where their parents live. You can't be registered in two places. You're going to be only registered in one place. What a lot of people get a little confused about is, well, I live here in Marion County and I'm registered at my parents' address, but I'm going to go to Valparaiso. Well, you can get an absentee ballot in the fall and have it sent to Porter County, your dorm address is at Valparaiso, and then send it back in after you vote on the paper ballot. Or you could move your registration to Porter County from Marion County and vote in person in Porter County. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions about that?
I do real quick. Is there like a limit to how many times that somebody could change their address? So like if we were going from a dorm back to home and then back and forth?
No. I mean, just think about timing it. So people aren't going to know their dorm address or maybe their apartment address at school until they move in August, right? And that's when they could update their address in indianavoters.com. Like you don't want to be touching it multiple times for where it is now. So if they're registered at home right now and they don't know their school address yet, then just tell them to wait until September and update with their school address if they want to vote in person where they're going to school. You just have to time it to kind of the elections. But you know what we see is people kind of tend to move every year when they're in school, or maybe they don't, maybe they try to stay in the same apartment or same dorm or whatever. And they forget that they need to update their address. So, you know, I would do it well in advance of the voter registration deadline. And since it's so easy to look yourself up at indianavoters.com and see what the address is, then you could just update it in that system and then you're all set for the next election. But you do have to pay attention to the voter registration deadline. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So with college students in particular, you really do need to help them think through a voting plan. So are they going to move their registration to their Indiana school address that are going to IU? Are they going to register in Monroe County and then vote in person in Monroe County? Or are they going to vote absentee and apply for an absentee ballot online, indianavoters.com, absentee ballot, and then it gets sent to their school address? And of course, if they're attending school out of state, most likely they're going to have to do an absentee ballot unless they intend to come home or something and vote here in person. But if they're attending school out of state, yes, they would apply for an absentee ballot.
What would you recommend for out-of-state students who are going to school in Indiana?
So they would have to vote absentee at their home address.
Okay.
With whatever the laws are in the state where they're coming from.
Okay.
If they're going to register in Indiana, they're going to need an Indiana ID, and that is going through the Indiana driver's license, you know, going to the BMV.
Okay.
Now, you can go to the BMV and say, I want an ID that's not a driving ID. And you can get an ID card and it's free because I'm going to use it for voting. Okay, then you're going to get an ID card. But if they're a student, I would have them do the voter, do the voter registration and vote where they're from, if they're
Okay.
coming to Indiana.
Thank you.
And voter, absentee voting rules differ by state. So there's 50 different ways that absentee voting is done. The reason why we don't mail in the voter registration forms, the physical paper forms, is because for first-time voters, if those forms get mailed in, they will have to present other documents at the time that they're voting for the first time. So, some kind of, well, your Indiana driver's license or state ID, and then a utility bill, a bank statement, something that confirms your address. So that's the reason why we hand deliver the forms. There are 5 kinds of absentee voting in Indiana. So by mail, but you need a reason. And we're one of very few states that requires a reason. And in my other life, one of the things that I work on is Indiana Vote by Mail, which is another small not-for-profit that works on making absentee voting easier. And there are 11 reasons that you need. One of 11 reasons, if you're a student, you would check the box, I'm going to be out of state. I'm not going to be in, I'm going to be away. Another reason is I'm 65 or older. Another reason is I'm caring for someone, et cetera, et cetera. There's 11 different reasons. Nobody at the voter registration office or the election board office checks those reasons to see that they're valid. They just check to see that a box is checked. So if that's the case, then why does Indiana hold on to them, is my argument. But early in-person voting, so the satellite locations or the city county building, is also considered absentee voting. But you showed up in person, you showed your ID, but it's just considered absentee. You can vote by traveling board, so people that are confined to their homes and the people that are caring for them can vote by traveling board. So that's 2 people, Dem and a Republican, come out to where the voter is and have them fill out the ballot, and then it's under dual control and it goes back and it gets counted. And obviously military and overseas vote by absentee, and then there are special accommodations for voters with print disabilities. The deadline to send in an application, either online or on paper, is October 24th. If you are requesting a travel board, so 2 people, 1 of each party, come out to you, you have until noon the day before the election, and same for military. The thing about absentee voting in Indiana is every time there's an election, you have to fill out an absentee ballot application. So if you're 65 and you qualify every time for an absentee ballot, you still have to fill out the application every single time in order to get mailed the ballot. If you're a student and you're out of state, that could change, and you would still need to do one for every election. So there was a new law passed last year. The county clerk's office used to be able to send out packets of absentee ballot applications to like nursing homes and things like that. And then, the activity directors or others would help the residents of these places fill in these forms and send them back in. Now they can't. Now that the election office cannot send them out en masse to nursing homes. They have to be requested by the voter or a voter's family member. I don't think this is enforceable, but I don't know how anybody would know that I'm related or not related to X person if I called in and said I wanted a absentee ballot application sent to Martha. Anybody could say anything on the phone, so I don't think it's enforceable. I don't know why they passed the law. It's stupid. But it doesn't preclude folks like you or folks like the League of Women Voters from going into a nursing home with a laptop and saying, who wants to get an absentee ballot? and sitting there with a laptop and helping them use the indianavoters.com website to request an absentee ballot. The county clerk can't go do that, but any of us could do it. And then this is the other confusing part of this is that on the paper form or on the online application, you have to fill in your Indiana state ID number, your driver's license or permit or ID card number, and the last four are your social security number, or if you've got your unique voter ID number, which nobody has that, their unique voter ID number. And if you don't fill out those numbers, then you have to send in a photocopy of your ID. And I saw people last year after this law passed in the 2023 session, and I was at the Election Services Center doing something or other, and some elderly people brought in their absentee applications, and they handed over their driver's license so a photocopy could be taken of it. And it's like, well, you just could have filled out your driver's license number on this application and not given a photocopy of your driver's license to the election staff. And so people were very confused about that. So as long as on the form you've put your ID number, then you don't have to put in a copy of your ID. It was very confusing last year when this passed. Any questions about that? Okay. Again, ballots are never automatically mailed. You can apply online, which is what I would recommend if anybody wants an application. Then you know that it's gotten to the election office and not lost in the mail somewhere. Paper applications have to be received by October 24th. I already said there were 11 reasons. You can hand deliver your ballot once you've received it at home, voted it, put it in the envelope, signed the envelope. You can hand deliver it to the election board office or any satellite voting location. But you can't go collect them from a bunch of people and turn them in. It has to be the voter or a member of the voter's household, basically, that turns it in. You can turn it in to a vote center on election day. If it's been voted, or if you haven't mailed it back, and you can go to a vote center on election day, surrender your paper ballot, which renders it void, and still vote in person. Does that make sense? Okay.
I'm so sorry, if let's say we're registering college student,
Okay.
but a lot of them may need to opt for absentee ballots.
Mhm.
Can we register them and also help them apply for an absentee ballot at the same time? Or is there like a lag time between registering and needing to get the absentee ballot application done?
No, they would need to be in the statewide voter registration system in order to request an absentee ballot, fill out the
Okay.
application for an absentee ballot. So it's actually 2 different times that you would need to go in. So register them at indianavoters.com, give it a few weeks, and then they can go back in and request an absentee ballot.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. I know I'm talking a lot about absentee voting, but where things go wrong with absentee voting is that people forget to sign the outside of the envelope. That's what the verification is, that you are who you say you are when you return that ballot in that envelope. People either forget to sign it, or the signature doesn't match what we have on file, and it goes through a bipartisan signature review process. And if it gets rejected for any reason, Indiana, based on a lawsuit from a few years ago, now has a cure process. In other words, the election board office has to send out something to the voter saying, we couldn't verify your signature, or your signature was missing. You have X number of days to cure this, come present your ID, fill out this form and sign it and send it back to us, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of ways that can happen, but that's where things get screwed up with absentee voting. So people have to pay attention to what the directions are in those envelopes. I already talked about absentee is early in person. There's the vote.indy.gov website. So again, we are a vote center in Marion County and we can vote anywhere in Marion County. Hamilton County, as for instance, is not a vote center county. You have to go to a specific place based on where you live. But in Marion County, we can go anywhere. It really makes it a lot easier. And vote.indy.gov is the site that you would go to. Who's on your ballot? Go to vote 411. So this year we have, in addition to president, we have governor and lieutenant governor, attorney general, some state Senate and House, the whole state House and the state Senate. We have some congressional folks. There's some township advisory boards and some other local offices. But that's who you will go to vote 411 and based on your address, find out who's on your ballot.
Yeah, and I'll just do a quick plug really quickly for that. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. I go to it all the time. And you guys did a great job with kind of explaining the different roles of each of those different elected officials. Because I think a lot of people don't really know, what does their county surveyor or their county coroner do? And like, how is that going to impact me? So there's kind of an explanation of that. And then having that also that information about where these candidates stand on different issues is super, super helpful. So I always recommend this to everybody when preparing to go vote.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. I appreciate
yeah.
that. There is a Hoosier Bill of Rights that when I work at a vote center, so there's two roles. There's a clerk and a inspector, and then the inspector is the one who runs the polling site, basically has the keys to open the equipment and get it running and all that stuff. And we have to post this. It's included with the kit of information that we have. We have to post this Indiana Voters Bill of Rights at every polling site. It's in the kit of things that we are given. So yeah, if you want to read the Voters Bill of Rights, it's also online. We have not seen any challengers. Voters cannot be challenged because they are a college student, because they are having a ballot mailed to their dorm address or whatever. You can't be challenged because of a perceived affiliation with any particular political party or support for anything. People aren't supposed to come into the polls wearing controversial things. But we got into a little mishmash with that in 2020 when there were some people wearing MAGA gear that came in to vote, and we had to ask them to, go turn the shirt over or something, or take the hat off or whatever. But I think that they were looking to try to pick a fight. A conforming name, just so you know, it doesn't need to be identical. So if their voter registration is Robert and their ID says Bob, sure. Jen, Jennifer, et cetera, et cetera. But if your voter registration says Joseph and your ID says Robert, that is not the same. So as long as it's substantially similar. The shoot is where you can't be approached with campaign information by those people outside of a vote center. Yep, and then vote 411. Yeah, some of this, yeah, that was it. I'm gonna stop the share and we can answer questions. The other website that I would recommend, so really there's three, in addition to vote 411, and I should have put up a slide about this. So vote411.org, indianavoters.com, vote.indy.gov, and then the last one is pollworker.indy.gov. So if you're talking to people about voting and they are also interested in being a poll worker, they could go to that website and fill out the application, and then you would be assigned later this year you would be contacted to be assigned to a polling location as close as reasonable, probably in the township that you live in. I am doing some talks in the coming weeks to, who is that I'm talking to? I think I'm talking to the Indianapolis Hebrew congregation because they want to recruit poll workers from amongst their congregants. And so we're going to talk about what that process is. And pollworker.indy.gov is the website. So really there's 4 websites. Vote 411, indianavoters.com, vote.indy.gov, pollworker.indy.gov. Does anybody have any questions about those?
I have more of a comment about the poll workers thing, since like at MCCOY, we're a youth service intermediary. And so there are a lot of kids who might not be old enough to vote. And so I always direct them to like consider serving as a poll worker, because you can get actually an excused absence from school. And it's just a really, really cool, rewarding experience. And when I've mentioned that to like high schoolers, their eyes just like light up. They love the idea that they could be a poll worker and still be kind of involved in the civic process without being able to vote themselves. So
Right. So they have to be 16 or 17.
mhm.
They need parent and school permission. And they have to have a 3.0 GPA or above.
Yeah.
Now, if they're 18 and they're still in school, they have to be registered to vote too. If you're going to be an adult poll worker, 18 and over, you have to be registered to vote in Marion County.
Yeah.
To
I was
work.
a poll worker in 2020, and I had a really fun time, because it was, I mean, regardless of who people were voting for, obviously you don't ask questions, but it just, I think there was just this whole atmosphere of excitement, you know, to come in and, you know, cast your vote and everything. It's you know, it's a long day, but it's a really fun kind of experience.
Yeah. It's, you know, and Marion County with 186 polling sites needs probably, I'm going to get this wrong, 2,000 or 3,000 poll workers. That's a lot of people.
Mhm.
And so if you've never done it, I agree. I've done it for several years now, and it is vastly rewarding and makes you understand how safe our elections are and how well run they are, and can help you to understand it enough. The people who may be spouting about, oh, elections aren't safe and this and that's going on. No. I've worked at a polling site. I know how safe this stuff is. Yes.
Do you have to live in the county to be a poll worker? So like, for example, I live in Southern Indiana, so I couldn't be a poll worker in Marion, correct? Okay.
No. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have several questions, and it was regarding, that was one question, was I'm a statewide organization and I'll be at events throughout the state. Is there a similar poll worker site on the state level at that voter portal for them to contact, or they need to go to their specific county election office and ask them what that is? Because I can't reach out to every single county and ask them what the process is. I just don't have staff since I'm a volunteer, and so is my organization. So we would just need to direct them to that county office, correct?
The county election board, yes. And interestingly, I mean, we have 92 counties, so we have 92 county clerks. And I used to live in Tippecanoe County, but I've lived in Marion County for a long time, 22 years. And yeah, you have to be a registered voter in Marion County to work the Marion County polls. And as far as I know, Marion County is the only county that has this website that allows people to sign up to be poll workers.
Yep.
You have to go to, the county where you are and read about poll workers on that county clerk's website. In some places, the parties, and supposedly in Indianapolis too, but we're so big. I mean, we have 650,000 registered voters in Marion County. So the town, that's what the township precinct committee people are supposed to be doing, is getting out the vote and then also finding poll workers from their party. But I will tell you, Marion County just uses it to reach out to everybody they possibly can, the pollworker.indy.gov site. But yeah, you would have to go to each county clerk's website and say, you know, contact your county clerk's office, find out how to be a poll worker if that's what you want to do.
I have additional questions.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, Kate. Yeah, yeah, your party is, some of them, it's different by county. Go ahead, David.
And this is just kind of in general about voter registration. What resources could you point us to that are available to counter voter apathy? Why people don't get registered to vote, so that when we're speaking with them and trying to, you know, engage with them in a positive way about voting, what resources can we point them to? And specifically referring to voter registration misinformation. You sometimes hear, well, my vote's not going to count because you have all these illegals coming into the country that are getting registered and they're washing out my vote. And so my vote's not going to count. So why should I get registered? Why should I vote? I mean, and these are extreme and it's complete misinformation, but we know there are people out there putting out misinformation to purposely discourage people from getting registered or voting, because they tell them, you know, either, you know, elected people are all crooks, so why should you vote for them? Or, you know, your vote's not going to count because there's all these other all this wrong information going out there. Are there resources you can point us to so we can educate our volunteers about how to counter those arguments?
Yeah, so there are a number of good resources, and I don't have them at my fingertips, but I can send them to Sarah. That would be some resources that you could distribute to people to say, hey, like, let's not believe that. Do you think if there was a bunch of illegal voting going on in Indiana, it would be all over the news? No, it does not happen. So yeah, I mean, logic dictates that somehow I think it missed that, some people missed that part of the train, that yes, there's bad information out there, and you don't want to call people foolish. You want to have honest and reasonable conversations with people. But yeah, I will work on getting a list of that to Sarah that she can then share with the group, so that you can look at other websites that have good information. Too many to list, actually, but I will get them to Sarah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any questions?
Okay, I will quickly then do a quick shameless MCCOY plug. You're going to see a lot more information about voting and voter outreach and everything from us moving forward. We're working on putting together some materials and things like that we're happy to send your way for you to download yourself, or physical copies of things. We're putting together some trifolds with like all sorts of information condensed into one trifold. We also are putting together some stickers, some magnets and things like that with QR codes that lead to resources and everything. So just kind of stay tuned. If you don't already follow us on social media, we're going to be sharing a lot of stuff via social media. But then obviously, if you get resources, emails from us and things like that, you'll see more information. I will give you guys kind of the first look of our website in progress. We're putting together kind of like a voting page that I wanted to share with you. It's still kind of being developed, so there's a lot more coming soon in terms of like links for downloading things and whatnot. But I definitely wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. We are also going to be offering the same training on June 13th. Is that correct? Yeah. So in just a little over 2 weeks, we'll be offering the same training in person, where we're going to have these resources available for you to come by it and pick up. If that's something that you're interested in, or if you want to share the opportunity with your colleague or with any colleagues of yours. But yeah, if there are no other questions, I just want to give a huge thanks to Barbara. This is fantastic information. I definitely will plan on keeping in touch with you for other questions that might come up and things like that, because I know voting can sometimes be like a scary thing, but then, you know, there are many, many ways that people can make sure that their voice is heard and to make sure that their voice or that their vote is counted and everything. So, but yeah, if there aren't any other questions, I'm happy to stop the recording and we can enjoy the rest of our day. Thank you all for being here.